Let's say your question is to solve the polynomial equation, and the equation they've given you is 3x equals 0. So you're looking at that, you're thinking, okay, 3 times something has to be 0. Well, the only thing that you multiply by to get 0 is 0. So I know that x has to be 0 to make this statement true. If they give you something a little more complicated and they say, what if I have 3 times x plus 1 equals 0? So then I'm thinking, okay, 3 times some crazier stuff has to equal 0. Well, it's the same idea. It's my crazy stuff has to somehow become 0 to make this true, because 3 is not going to be 0. So then I'm focusing on the x plus 1, and what would make that 0? I'm doing addition now, so if I want to turn x plus 1 into 0, I've got to do the opposite of 1. That is, negative 1 plus 1 would give me 0. If you want to do the steps you learned in another class, you might have been thinking, oh, I want to get the x by itself, so I'm going to move the 1 away by doing the opposite and subtract 1 from both sides. Then that gets rid of the positive 1 term, and I have x just left on the left side, and then I have the negative 1 left on the right side. And so then now x is all by itself, x equals negative 1 solves the equation. But either way, we know x has to be negative 1. So then when I come up to the top, up here, and I say, okay, 3 times negative 1 for x plus 1, well, yeah, negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 3 times 0, that's going to equal 0. So that makes sense. Well, what if it's something with an x times an x plus 1? And this is what you've been seeing on your homework more. So now I've got something times that same something plus 1 more has to be 0. Well, because I don't have a 3 in front anymore, now this x value can represent something. It can be a number like 3, or it could be a 0. And if it's a 0, then I've got the case of 0 times some number equals 0. That's one way to get 0. Or I could start with a number like 3, and if I multiply it by a 0, I could get 0. Or if I have 0 times 0, I get 0. Those are the 3 different ways I can get 0 by multiplying. And to get the first one, I'd have to have x be 0. And then I'd have 0, if I plug in 0 for x everywhere, plus 0, or times 0 plus 1. And then I'm asking, does that equal 0? Well, yeah, it does, because 0 times 1 is 0. So that's true. I could do the same thing, though, and have it be like the second case over here, where I've got a number times 0. So if I had that case, then I would be saying, alright, we figured out that x plus 1, to turn that into a 0 on the other page, I need my x to be negative 1. So I would have negative 1 for that guy, and a negative 1 for that x, plus 1, and I wonder, does that equal 0? Well, it should, because we did it on the other page, and we know that this turns to 0, and then I've got negative 1 times 0. And any number times 0 is 0. So that's true. Now the third case over here, we can't have, because if x is 0 for this first spot, right here, then x0 in this spot we found made that 1. So I'm never going to have 0 times 0 from this equation. But you could if I had different variables in there. Like maybe I had x and a y. Then I'd have x times y plus 1. Then my x and y could be a different value, and If my x were 0 and my y were the negative 1, then I'd have 0 times 0 equals 0. After you've found the two answers, x can either be 0 or x can be the negative 1 we found to make this statement true, then you're done.